Okay.
Hello, Afnan. Welcome at Baghdad Toastmasters.
Hussein, who's the other admin at Baghdad Toastmasters page? Only Ruslan and Faisal?
Yeah.
House also?
I'm only on Instagram. I'll put it on Instagram now.
Okay, put it on Instagram, please. Thank you. How about the Facebook page?
It's only Ruslan. Only Ruslan.
Only Ruslan? Okay.
Yeah.
Right,
Therefore,
guys. All right, it's 5 minutes to 5.
Yep.
I'd assume that we'll leave the guest introductions to the end, and we'll play a little TT afterwards.
What do you mean by TT?
If you concur.
Oh, I'm not on Instagram anymore.
All right.
I think I have signed out.
Nice. We have several guests so far. International guests. Interesting. So
I can't put it on Instagram.
you can't.
No.
Okay. I'll share it on my. I'll share it on my profile. All right, guests. I presume some of you have our first timers at our club. I see Martin, Isra, Jasim, Mr. Pete, and Saba, Afnan, Badra, Noor Al Khawaja, and Swani Go. Okay, good to have you here. This is Baghdad Toastmasters, the online platform of the club. We usually do our sessions live, but due to the coronavirus situation, we're shifting to the online business, online sessions. So some of you have been attending our club for several meetings so far. Some of you are first timers. So just an introduction. Baghdad Toastmasters is a club related to the Toastmasters International Organization for Public Speaking and Leadership Skill Development. Requirement for professional work, for maybe casual requirement when you're traveling abroad or something. All in all, it's mainly about communication skills. So that's the core learning process of the Toastmasters, and that's what we do at Baghdad Toastmasters. Of course, sometimes it's about having a little fun. Sometimes it's about having serious topics. The content always changes according to the participants themselves. So it's a never-ending learning process here. It's always depending on the attendees themselves, what they present, how they improve. You know, all of us are improving here. It's a long journey. And I'm really glad to have you here with us today, you know, joining our club session today in this learning process. Today, we are holding a special meeting, a little different from our routine meetings that we hold every Friday. Today, we are having a workshop that will be presented. Okay. We are having a workshop delivered by Mr. Harold Patterson. As you see, if you're opening your screens, Mr. Harold is joining us from Oklahoma City, state of Oklahoma, from the USA. He's, I would dare to say, he's an expert in the communication skills and leadership skills. He has worked in the various aspects of the television and radio industry. He worked from a reporter to a manager to a director to the television and radio networks. Also, he has a very long career with the Toastmasters organization and clubs. He worked as a as district secretary. He also was decorated a lot of honors by the Toastmasters Organization International itself. His journey started back at the 1983, and he won the World Public Speaking Contest at 1987. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is a decorated public speaking champion, and here he is. He's going to give us a workshop called Anatomy of Speech. So, Anatomy of Speech is all about tips and advice on how to build your speech and how to speak before an audience in public. Because as you know, speaking before in public, it doesn't have to be speaking as the election speech or, you know, as a politician before an audience. It can just go to the very smaller scale as confronting your own family or friends, or influencing your coworkers, or delivering an idea in front of your bosses at work, or persuading some capitalist about supporting your you know, small project as an entrepreneur. So public speaking is a very important aspect that we do every day without knowing, and it go on several skills. So Mr. Patterson here is going to give us tips on how he did it, how about his own you know, journey, great journey with the public speaking, and how he become a champion himself, and how to become a champion yourself at public speaking. So, Mr. Harold Patterson, without further ado, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much, Salam. It's certainly a pleasure to be with all of you, to cross oceans and continents to be with you today, and just think the technology is amazing that allows us to do these kinds of things. What I want to do with you today is share with you a little bit about how I created the speech that I won the World Championship of Public Speaking with. And then at the end of that, I'm going to show you that speech. So I'm basically going to put it together as I developed it and break it down a little bit, and then also show you the speech so that you can see for yourself and make your own decisions about your feelings about the speeches. And then I understand we'll have times for some Q&A, some questions and answers after that's over. But just to give you a little background on that speech, I won the World Championship of Public Speaking in 1987, but I also participated in the international finals in 1986. Of course, I didn't win then, I didn't place in those finals, but this speech was actually created that year in 1986. And so I had it a year before I took it to the international finals in 1987. But what happened in 1986 was I won my club area division contest, and then the district contest, I finished in second place, and so I wasn't going to advance. We did a regional contest at that time. It was 3 weeks after the district, and so I knew I wasn't going to compete, so I went on about my Toastmasters duties. And about a week after the district contest, I was called by the district governor and said that the winner of the contest was not going to be able to go to the Region 3 contest. And since I was the runner-up, would I be able to go? Of course, I said sure, but I didn't have a speech. And I had 2 weeks to prepare the speech for a Region 3 contest, which covered the southwest portion of the United States. So I put together this speech, "The Pain Passes." And I had heard this quote by Renoir about the pain passes, and so I thought it would make a good speech, but I only had 2 weeks to put it together, and I knew the importance of knowing and memorizing your speech. So I had to make it as simplistic as I could. So from there, I went to the manuals, as we had at that time, and discovered things. Even though I'd been a Toastmaster for 3 years already, I discovered things that I really hadn't read. So read up on all the information that you have in your pathways, or if you're still looking at manuals, then read up in those, because there's sage wisdom there that we can all benefit from. You'll bear with me just a moment. I'm going to go to the screen share and start showing you a presentation. And here we go. All right, anatomy of a speech. And I created an acronym after this was over. I felt a lot of pressure after I had won the World Championship of Public Speaking because people were asking me, okay, how did you do it? I want to do it too. What's the secret? For some reason, they felt like I had some sort of secret that I did this. And the only secret was that I was myself. And so I would offer that to you, that each of you have your own secret. Each of you have it inside of you. What I'm going to tell you here is how I did this. I'm not in any way suggesting that this is the way that you need to build a speech, or this is the way that you have to do it, because each and every one of us are different. And that is the best asset that you have, is that you are yourself and nobody else can do that. Now, this acronym from the word speech is to help you build a quality, entertaining, and inspirational speech. I just feel like if you're in a competition situation, that it needs to be an inspirational speech. And just a side tip to that, I'm basically going to look at this as a contest speech, the 7-minute format for a contest speech. But what I've discovered in delivering this presentation over the years, I've had a number of people come and tell me that this really applies to long-term speeches, speeches that you take anywhere. And you know, they're absolutely correct, because if you look up the definition about how to develop an inspirational speech, then what it tells you is the same thing with this. With a 7-minute speech, I'm going to tell you, you need 3 to 4 stories in that speech, 2 minutes in length each, or roughly that. In your manuals, in your instructions, in your pathways, it's going to tell you for an inspirational speech for 40 minutes in length, you need 15 to 20 2-minute stories in order to motivate people. So keep that in mind. Let's look at the first letter is S, and S stands for stories. You want to tell stories. Remember, you can develop a speech relatively fast by telling stories, because stories are easy to remember. They're not only easy for the listener to remember, but they're also easy for you to remember in putting that speech together. That was the help that I needed in 1986 to put this together. And so I felt like with stories, I could do that. I could make my premise about the pain passes, and then I could tell stories to support it. And then for the close, I could essentially repeat the opening. The P stands for personalize your speech. My mentor, International Director Dick Snyder, had told me as I spoke, he said, you know, Harold, you give pretty good speeches, but you never talk about yourself. You need to personalize your speech. And I said, well, I really don't want to talk about myself. I don't think there's anything real fascinating about myself, so I don't want to talk about myself. I'm not comfortable with that. And he said, well, here's why you need to do it. He said, because it gives credibility to your speech. If people understand that you've experienced what you're talking about, then you'll provide some credibility. Because people are sitting out there and saying, why is this person talking to me about this? And once you let them know that in some way that it's influenced your life, then you have the credibility that you need, and it provides more power for your speech. The 2 E's in speech stand for 3 words: energy, emotion, and enthusiasm. Energy comes naturally if you do the 2 above. If you do the stories, if you personalize your speech, then you gain energy from that. You're telling something that's close to you, close to your heart. You will get energy from that. People will feel that energy. This energy, emotion, and enthusiasm doesn't have to be overbearing. Energy and enthusiasm can be done with a whisper. It's all in how you present it. So it should be measured. But energy, emotion, and enthusiasm are very important. As Emerson said, nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. The C in the word speech stands for confidence. You want to practice your speech, make it part of you. I know that in most cases, people don't suggest that you memorize your speech, that you just learn it very well and you have the ability to know it so that if you're interrupted, you can regain yourself. And I believe that's true. I don't, for most speeches, if I go and speak to a civic club or something such as that, I don't have a speech memorized. There might be questions in the middle of it. There might be an interruption. And I don't want that to confuse the issue of the speech. But for a speech contest speech, you do have to memorize it. There's a time limit. If you go over that time limit, you're disqualified. So it's important that you memorize that 7-minute speech, 6.5, 7-minute speech, however long it is, and that you not go over time. In a minute, when I show you the video of my speech, the man that you see introduced me, his name is Tom Richardson. And 2 to 3 years before I participated in that contest, he participated in the international contest. And he was disqualified. His speech went 7 minutes and 32 seconds, and he was disqualified. So it can happen. It's important that you know your speech very well. Not only memorize it, but internalize it. Practice your speech. Make it part of you. In 1983, and this is something I would suggest too, that go and watch past winners. Not just mine, but go and watch other past winners. Find and model or emulate somebody that you like. If you hear a speaker speak and you say, that's what I like, then you can emulate stories as that. I watched the 1983 World Championship of Public Speaking that Roy Fenstermaker won. And that was my model. Roy Fenstermaker was retired at that time. And he gave a fabulous speech, and it won the World Championship of Public Speaking. But what happened to him at the beginning of that speech was an amazing event. In the first 20 seconds of his presentation, he made a gesture such as this, and he knocked his microphone from his lapel. And a timer had to pick it up and hand it back to him. And he did the remainder of the speech holding that microphone first in his right hand and then in his left hand. But by the end of the speech was so compelling, and he maintained his composure, that he won the World Championship of Public Speaking. You have to be prepared for anything. As I practiced my speech to gain confidence, I practiced in clubs that were breakfast clubs where people were eating breakfast and giving orders while I was talking. Glasses were clinking and silverware was hitting plates. And I did that so that I would not be distracted at anything that came up. And it helped too, because at the Region 3 speech contest in 1986, this was before cell phones, before any of the current technology, there was a phone out in the hallway of the hotel that rang 8 times at 11 p.m. at night as I was giving my speech. And so it benefited me greatly to be able to have that confidence. Finally, anybody ever get nervous before giving a speech? Yeah, I still get nervous. Happens to me to this very day that I get nervous. And as I spoke in speech contests, I even got more nervous each time. It was so strong at times, I would sit up there and I'd say, Harold, what were you thinking that you got yourself into this again? But you know what? When you start thinking about yourself, that is a form of depression. And what causes depression? It's because you're thinking too much about yourself. So I created a little prayer that I said before my speeches, and I said, I have a great speech. I will give it in the best way that I know. Somebody in this room, somebody, maybe only one person, will benefit from what I have to say. Nothing else matters. I have a great speech. And with that, then I would begin to look out over the crowd and I would say to myself, who is that one person? Who needs to hear this tonight? And soon I was forgetting about myself and I was concentrating on the fact that somebody needed to hear what I've had to say. So I tell you, if you get nervous before you speak, just remember somebody really does need to hear what you have to say. And it's true. Do you ever come out of this club meeting by not feeling a little bit better than when you went in? It's because you've learned something. somebody has shared something about themselves. Somebody has shared their knowledge. So that's how you gain confidence. Confidence will be very important to you. The letter H in the word speech stands for humor and hope. After my experience in the international finals in 1986, where I did not place, I discovered that my presentation did not have any humor in it. And no, the international speech contest, if you look at the judging form, it doesn't require you to have any humor, so you don't have to have any humor in it. But the top 3 finishers all had humor in their speech. What the judging form does say, it recognizes audience response. And what I realized at that time was that they were getting tremendous audience response. At the same time, humor, if you're giving an intense speech, humor is a way to relax your audience. It's a way to bring them down so that you bring those emotions up and down. You build them up and you take them back. But the humor always needs to be tied to the theme of your speech. You make it part of your speech. Make your points with humor. Hope is a fundamental need of human existence. I felt like the presentation that I made, if I spoke in a speech contest, that it needed to be something that provided hope for somebody, and that was me. There's no requirement for hope, but I felt like that was important. I think anytime that somebody is judging 7, 8, or 9 speakers in a speech contest, that a lot of the speeches are going to be very, very close. So close that the judges can't make up their mind about who did what. So if there's one small thing, if one is dressed a little better than the other, if one had a little better eye contact than the other, if one provided hope and another one didn't, then that would work in your favor. So put humor and hope in your presentation as well. So in 1986, as I put this together, I created this system, and you've all seen it before, you've heard it before. It's a trite saying, but it was important to me at that time to build this speech. Remember, when I first started it, I only had 2 weeks to put it together. So start with your supporting premise, a quote. So you're going to tell them what you're going to tell them. And I would estimate that to be 1 minute and 20 seconds. And doesn't have to be that long. You decide how long that opening is. Then in the body of a 7-minute speech, tell 3 stories. So in other words, these stories are going to support your premise or whatever you have in there. And they should be roughly 1 minute 35 to 1 minute and 40 seconds in length. So it's in the body that you're going to tell them. Then in the close, re-emphasize your original premise, quote, or tell them what you told them. And remember, in your close, you are now very excited because you have just made your case in the body. Your stories have supported your supporting premise and supported it so well in your own mind that you are energized in this close. And that's when you're going to tell them what you told them. So yeah, there's that trite phrase. In the open, you tell them what you're going to tell them. In the body, you tell them. And in the close, you tell them what you told them. All these times are flexible. So it doesn't have to be exactly these times. These are just the model that I had to put together in order to make this work for me. But let's look at the anatomy of the pain passes, which was the title of my speech. It ran for 7 minutes and 18 seconds. Something to keep in mind there, this was longer than what I intended for it to be. Every time I practiced it before clubs, in my house, wherever I practiced it, it was always 7 minutes to 7 minutes and 5 seconds. But at the International Speech Contest, before a crowd of over 1,600 people, it ended up being 7 minutes and 18 seconds. So I was pushing the limit of time. So I would recommend a speech that's 6.5 minutes in length might be your best practice method. You don't know how an audience is going to respond. If they respond in such a way, you have to give them time to respond. That's just good speaking etiquette. At the open for the pain passes in my supporting premise was 1 minute and 25 seconds. And you'll get to see that in just a few minutes. Now, I managed to get 4 stories in my 7-minute speech. So the 4 stories that supported the premise, the first one is 1 minute and 15 seconds. The second one is 1 minute 27. The third one is 59. And the fourth one is 1 minute 30. You're not going to get all of them exactly in the time that you want. You need to tell the story, and you need to fine tune that story each time so that you get your message across in the way that you want to do it. And then in the close, remember, more energetically, you've sold yourself, hopefully sold your audience on what you're trying to tell them, and that will go for, and the pain passes was 42 seconds in length. So you can see that it was shorter than the opening. But at the beginning, I had to make that so that it was very similar. Now, the speech that I made, I gave the pain passes at the regional contest in 1986, and it was about 75 to 80% of the speech in 1987. Speech in 1987, I changed some stories. I did not have humor in it in 1986, and so I changed some things so I could be sure and get some humor into that speech. If you want to see that speech on your own sometime, I'm going to show it to you now, but if you want to see it, the best way is to go to youtube.com and go to Harold Patterson, The Pain Passes, and that will give you that speech. And now I'm going to briefly stop the share and go back to it because I'm not sure how to do this otherwise, and pull up the speech, and we'll take a look at it. And I'll be quiet as it gets started. So here we go. This is Tom Richardson introducing me, the 1987 International Convention in Chicago, Illinois.
Speaker number 9, Harold Patterson. The pain passes. The pain passes. Harold Patterson. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, friends, and distinguished guests. At the beginning of this century, in a home in southern France, the great French impressionist Henri Matisse watched as an easel was propped in front of a crippled old man. And he watched as a nurse placed a paintbrush between the fingers of the old man's twisted, rheumatic hand. And then Matisse turned to his friend, the aging artist, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, and asked him why he continued to paint when the pain was so intense. And Renoir's answer was this: my dear friend, the pain passes, but the beauty remains. What a magnificent thought. The pain passes, but the beauty remains. Renoir's pain eventually took his life, yet the beauty of his works, the creation of his art, remains with us even today. The very nature of our human existence ensures us that we
Mr. Patterson, please be advised, don't put yourself on mute because that's going to mute the video as well.
Toastmasters, probably the greatest pain that we will experience will be in those anxious moments just before we give our first speech. Our icebreaker, remember? That knot right in the pit of your stomach, the trembling legs, the blood racing through your veins, those sweaty palms. Yet no matter how great that pain is, there is no greater beauty than the feeling of accomplishment as we take our seat when it's over. And that's a feeling of beauty that remains with us always. On June 23rd, 1940, a baby girl was born to a couple in Clarksville, Tennessee. The joy of birth was overshadowed by the complications of its prematureness. The child developed double pneumonia and then scarlet fever, and by the time she was 6 years old, it was determined that she had polio. And that meant braces, confinement, and excruciating pain. Yet with each visit to the doctor, her questions were always the same. When can I take the braces off? When will I walk? When will I be able to run with my friends? And each time the doctor's answer was this: I don't know. Maybe never. Little girl's pain was great, yet it was not strong enough to overcome her spirit. Because one day she did take the braces off. And she did walk. And she did run. And did she ever run? In Rome in 1960, she ran for the whole world. To the French, she was known as La Gazelle. To the Italians, the Black Pearl. And to the rest of the world, her friends, and especially her 18 brothers and sisters, she was known as Wilma Rudolph, fastest woman in the world. Winner of 3 Olympic gold medals in Rome in 1960, Wilma Rudolph was living proof that the pain passes and the beauty remains. The pain of losing a loved one is something that never quite goes away, yet in time, even the pain of a loss is eased by the remembrance of that person's life. In 1935, a man died tragically in a plane crash in Alaska. The entire world felt the pain of this loss. His gift was laughter, and at this time he was helping a troubled world laugh its way through a Great Depression. The loss of Will Rogers was a painful one indeed, yet the beauty of his life, his wit and wisdom, remains with us to this very day. Will Rogers said this: in Oklahoma, we have an average annual rainfall of 31.2 inches. And boy, you ought to be there the day we get it. And again, the beauty remains. Sometimes our pain may be both physical and emotional. In 1983, a man and woman were married at the age of 34, and 2 years later, they decided to have a child. Not an unusual decision, but because of their age, they knew that certain precautions must be taken. And they were. For several thorough examinations, the doctor said, go for it. Their dream of having a child of their own would soon come true. And for the first 7 months, the pregnancy progressed flawlessly, but then the doctor noticed that something was wrong. A condition called preeclampsia would send the mother to bed under 24-hour hospital observation and threaten the lives of both mother and child. The only cure was to deliver the child now, but too soon, too early to do that. Valuable time was needed, so they waited and prayed. 3 agonizing weeks went by. Finally, the doctor said, "We must deliver this child now." At 5:21 p.m. on July 24th, 1985, the doctor handed me my newborn daughter. And he looked at me and said, "She's 6 weeks premature and only 4 pounds, 4 ounces. She's a fighter. She'll be just fine." And as the tears flowed freely, my wife and I now knew that the pain had passed. The pain of life is inevitable for each of us. And whether it be physical, emotional, or both, long-term, short-term, or lasting a lifetime, we must remember to be true to ourselves and to do those things which bring us the greatest joy. And then finally, to remember, listen to, and embrace the words of Renoir as they are brushed across the canvas of our soul when he said, "My dear friend, the pain passes, but the beauty, oh, the beauty remains forever." Mr. Toastmaster.
They're known as Marty's miracles, dogs sentenced to death, brought back to health with the methods of Dr. Marty Goldstein.
One of the greatest cases I ever had is a Rottweiler named Whiskey. He was given less than 24 hours to live by the referring veterinarian. The owner was certain he was going to die.
But Dr. Marty, a vet dubbed the miracle, made one simple change that lengthened Whiskey's life.
And he just lived for years and years after that.
Dr. Marty Goldstein.
Okay, sorry about that. Still haven't figured out how to turn everything off yet. Thank you for your response. That was a long time ago. I guess you recognized that I was much younger back then. And so, yes, that really was me. And so it was a wonderful experience, and it's something that I will always remember. And so now I'm ready to take some questions and provide some answers if you would like to do that.
All right. First of all, thank you, Mr. Harold. I mean, if that was you 33 years ago, I mean, I can see that you you still have it. I thought that I'll be hearing some, I don't know, little less, but that was great. I cannot believe that if that was the 86, that was on the finals that you didn't win, right?
Yeah, 1980. That was from 1987. Yes.
7. Well, that was great, and you look like a TV celebrity, in that video. So, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thanks again, Mr. Harold, for the delivery on your anatomy of speech workshop. Now we'll have some time for questions. If you have to direct questions for Mr. Harold about public speaking tips, building a speech tips or advices, you are free to go. You can raise hand or write in the chat if you want to ask a question. Okay, so I'm gonna start first. Okay, Mr. Harold, you referred that you would love to, if someone was writing a speech, it's better if he was experienced with, if he was showing his own experience that is related to the idea, to the delivery that he's doing. So how about if he was doing a theoretical delivery, something that he has never experienced before, something that he has read about only? Is there a tip or is there a method to follow in order to convince the audience?
Well, I think obviously if it's something that you've read about and you want to speak about, there is a sincere interest in that. And I think there's probably a way for you to tie yourself to that presentation simply because you're interested in it. I know I've heard other speakers talk about the fact that they maybe didn't have something themselves, but maybe it was something that their father or mother had or that a relative had. And they talked about the impressions that it made on their life. So I think you can tie yourself in that way. And even, I know I have a friend in my own club here in Oklahoma City, and he's always wanted to be an anthropologist. He's not, but he wanted to be an anthropologist. So he gives us a lot of speeches about anthropology, and he can tie that, and we know that, we can see that in him. When I talked about Roy Fenstermaker, the 1983 world champion of public speaking, his speech was about retirement. And he really never mentioned himself in the speech, but you could tell by looking at him, he was of retirement age. You knew that he was facing this issue of retirement. So there's lots of ways to make that work for you. It's not, I don't want to make that a limiting element, but I do believe that in some way you need to tie yourself into that.
Okay, thanks for the answer. That did make sense. I took some notes. We have some people raising hands. First one is he's using a nickname node to judges anonymity. So you can unmute yourself, node to judges anonymity, and ask away.
Thank you so much. My name is Dityam Fatanal. I'm from District 79, Saudi Arabia, but I'm stuck at the moment in Florida for the last 6 months. Dityam, Harold Patterson, nice to meet you again. I have actually very, very short 3 questions. The first one, how many stories one can tell in one speech? You know, is one story a good idea, or what's the maximum? The second one is, what do you think of taking the audience on a roller coaster of emotions, which some speakers do? And of course, the last question is, which I always ask, during your time, were the judges anonymous or not? And do you know why they changed? Because I am against this principle of anonymity, since we trust the judges. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. I'll try to remember all those questions. I think it was the first one was about the number of stories in the speech. And first of all, I want to reiterate what I said at the beginning. It's far be it from me to tell one person how to do a speech. I watch past world champions and I watch them do that. And after the speech is over, I say, gee, I'd have never thought of that. And so how would I know to recommend to somebody to do the right thing in order to do that? So I think it's entirely up to you as to what you do. Remember, the year before, in 1986, the woman who won the World Championship of Public Speaking in 1986 was told not to wear red or white because of the camera problems. Technology was not as great as it is now, and so they didn't want people to wear red or white. Now, I wore an off-white shirt, and I did have a dark red tie, which they said was okay, but she walked out in a white dress and a red scarf, and she won the World Championship of Public Speaking. Now, that's probably not part of the speaking element, but I wouldn't want anyone to be able to tell somebody that they can't do something. So as far as a number of stories in there, I think you can have as many as you want. I think it's going to take you a minute and a half or so to make your point on your story. As I showed in mine, one of my stories was only 59 seconds in length, so it can be shorter. But I think the more supporting evidence that you have to support your premise, the better off that you're going to be. For the moment, I forgot the second part of your question there, but I'll go to
taking
the judges.
The people on a roller coaster of emotions. Do you think it's a good technique?
I like that. I think that's a great technique. I think that's because if you're giving them an intense topic, you need to give them an opportunity to relax a minute. Then you can take them back up. If you want to take them up to something very intense again, then give them another minute to relax. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And I don't know, I know what you're talking about with the judges, about making them anonymous, having been a judge in high-level contests and being a chief judge in some high-level contests. I really think that's the right thing to do, because judges will get asked a lot of questions after a contest is over. And I think that from that vantage point that it's good. Also, it's good that the speakers don't really know where the judges are. That way they have to put their best, for lack of a better term, their best speaking foot forward and make sure that they speak to the entire room, speak to everybody. And so just my opinion, and I know that others have differences of opinion, but I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you, Mr.
Can I go for the one? I have a teeny tiny question to ask.
Yeah, sure. Go again. Go, Sam.
Mr. Paterson, thank you so much for your presentation and for your speech. And it was a really lovely speech. And I really enjoyed it. And I've seen a lot of things that will make me realize how to organize my speech in the best way possible. So you mentioned engaging humor towards your speech and making the audience a lot of things that will make your speech even much more fun. The thing is though, how can you realize the amount of humor to be involved into your speech. That's being interactive with the audience.
I lost your audio in there periodically, so I did. You were going.
I was saying that how can you understand, or how can you realize the amount of humor required in your speech that will affect your audience in a very perfect way, without making it too much sarcastic and without making it too much lame?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. I think it's always hard to get a feel for what kind of humor the audience is going to appreciate. But a couple of things that you can do is turn it around on yourself and say, if you're going to practice some humor, say, okay, what if somebody said this to me? Try to put yourself in the audience and say it so you're saying it to yourself, and see how you feel about that personally. But at the same time, you can also try that out on your friends. And what I try to tell people too about humor, because I struggled with humor at the beginning too, but one of the things, and it sounds a little trite, but you have to begin to think funny. And by that is when you're talking to a friend, you're having a one-on-one conversation with somebody, and they say something that makes you burst out laughing, or you say something that makes them burst out laughing, write that down. Say, okay, how can I use this? This got a big laugh from one person. So you multiply that one person times how many people do we have in here? 25 or 30? Then that's a lot of laughter. And so you want to be able to begin to think about those funny kinds of situations.
Oh, thank you, Sam.
Can I go?
If I may, I'm asking people to raise hands or write in the chat, please.
I'm
so
right.
We have, okay.
I have raised my hand.
Salam,
sure thing.
I have a question.
In a minute, Mr. Pete, we have Mr. Ghassan and Miss Samantha. So I'll go first with, okay, Mr. Ghassan, go ahead.
Just a second. Yes, can you hear me, Mr. Howard?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sir. It's a pleasure meeting you. I'm sure you're familiar with the term stage fright.
Oh yeah.
A quick tip: if somebody goes on stage in front of a live audience, let's say a quantity of 150 to 200 people, and his mind went blank, a quick tip: how could he handle the situation?
Somebody steps out on a stage in front of 150 people.
Yes.
And their mind goes blank.
Yes, suddenly he forgets everything, although he has rehearsed for, I don't know, days and days. Sometimes it happens.
It does.
Yeah.
I think now I would probably say, you know what? I just forgot everything I was going to say.
I see. So you turn the odds to yourself.
Yes, I think with that, and I've experienced that before somewhat, not in front of 150 people.
Okay.
But I've said that, and it gets a big laugh.
I see.
And that will give you time to think through what's going on.
Yeah.
I think you have to walk out there with a belief. If you know what you're going to talk about, if you haven't prepared at all and you don't have anything to say, that's a different story. But if you've prepared something and it's up here, it's going to come back. And so you first need to remember that when you step out there, that it will come back. But just go ahead and admit the obvious, and you'll probably get a big laugh out of that. And then you can go on. But I think a sincere belief in the fact that message is there, and you'll get it back.
I see.
And I know stage fright's a big thing. I still have it, and it happens all the time. I had my Toastmasters meeting last night, and I had to do an evaluation last night, and so I want to make sure I do a good evaluation, so I get a little bit nervous before I do that. And they ask me a question in table topics, and I get nervous about that.
Yes.
So it still happens, but that's good for you. Just realize those things are good for you. Make it a positive.
I see. I see. Thank
Good
you very much,
question.
sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hassan. And we have
Thank you, sir.
Samantha from District 121.
Hello, everybody.
Mr.
Hope everybody's doing
Okay.
great.
Yeah.
This is Samarth from District 121. And thank you, Baghdad Toastmasters, for having this session, and especially meeting you, DTM Harold. It was a great pleasure, and it was absolutely mesmerizing to see you speaking. There was a lot to learn. Well, I just have a question for you. Well, we've seen technologies changed over the years, but is there anything which is radical in public speaking which has changed over time, which you personally see? Have any opinions on the changes in public speaking?
I think the biggest change that I've noticed is that there's much more movement on the stage, much more, if you want to call it showmanship, you can call it that, but I think there's much more movement on the stage. And the speakers out of my district that I've heard lately who have advanced very far, they have their speeches choreographed to movements on the stage. I think if I were to go back and do my speech over again and deliver it, probably the main thing I would change, I spent a lot of time changing all of the phrasing and the wording and all of that. I don't think I would change that much, but I do think I would change my movement. I would move a little bit more across the stage, especially in the beginning. I think that's the main thing that I've noticed about the speeches more currently. And I think that comes from more visibility. I mean, we've had television and movies have been around for a long time, but the more that we have all of the visuals that we have right now, like Zoom, the ability to do that, then it becomes more important to show ourselves. And I'm completely enamored by people who speak with sign language. And people who speak with sign language emote with their faces just fabulously. And I've talked to them about that, and they said that's a very important part or very important element of their communication, is to be able to do the sign language and show a lot of emotion with their face. And I think that's great. I think I even noticed it when I visited your club before, one of your speakers, and I'm sorry, I can't remember who she was, but she had great emotion in her face. And I think that's something that's very powerful. Those are the changes that I've noticed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samar, for your question. Next, we have Miss Sindhuja from District 121. Miss Sindhuja. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. Yeah.
Yes, you got it right. Thank you so much, Toastmaster Adam. First of all, thank you so much, distinguished Toastmaster Harold, for such an amazing session. Whenever I see your YouTube recording of the speech in the World Championship, it always feels like the first time I'm watching it. It is just so surreal. That moment is so surreal. I have one question for you. So my mentor keeps saying that he believes that there are two things to a speech. One is the purpose and the second one is the soul. What, according to you, is the soul of the speech?
The soul of my speech or any speech?
Of your speech.
My speech, I think I was trying to convey a message of hope in that speech. And I wanted people to come away in some form or fashion that there was a way of hope. I've had a number of comments from people over the years about parts of the speech that they listen to, and it surprises me at times the things that they say about the speech. They're all very nice and very complimentary, which I appreciate very much. But the things that they recognize, what I see is they tie that into some event that's going on in their life, or they have the ability to tie that in. And I can see that the message that I was trying to get across was a message of hope. You mentioned the other part of your question was about what was the purpose, I guess. I said the soul of my speech was hope, and a purpose. I guess for me, I'm having a kind of a gray line between the two of those there. But the purpose of the speech, I guess, you know, it would get to be a more practical element. And that was to develop a good quality presentation of the speech. I wanted to be able to utilize all of the things that you learn as a Toastmaster in developing a speech, and that comes to speech structure, good speech structure, and also the ability to make eye contact, the ability to provide gestures, all of those basic fundamental things that we learn as a speaker. And so I hope that answered your question. Very good question, something I should probably think about a little more.
Thank you so much. That really answers my question.
Thank you. Thank you, Toastmaster Sanduta. And next we have Toastmaster Shreyansh. Mr. Pete, you can ask away.
Yep. Hi, Harold. Thank you for sharing all the wisdom with us. And
certainly.
Yeah. My question is that when I deliver a speech, I many times find that it's not very easy for me to be easy with audience, because I feel that my speech or my vocal style is rather serious. So I have a serious tone. And as you talked about humor, to have a humor mindset, and is there something that we can do to make the audience more comfortable, or when we talk, change our speaking style? Because growing up, I had like not very good past. I had like troubled friends. I had like child bully, and then later on, friends who, I ended up really bad. So for me, it's really difficult to, have a very easygoing flow of communication. So do you have anything to suggest that how we can have when we speak or deliver speech, we can have a little bit of an ease in our communication?
Yes, one of the things that you should know is that you have that ability. That ability resides within you, and it's there. I think doing things as a speaker, yes, it's partly learning something, picking up the books and learning something from that. But a part of it is kind of an unpeeling of yourself and getting some of the things off of you so that your true self comes out. And so it is in there. You have the ability to do that. I would just sit back and relax and kind of listen to other people and see what they do, and then practice. Maybe, of course, you don't want to steal somebody else's topic necessarily, but maybe practice what they say in front of a mirror or record it. I mean, you can record yourself on your computer and play it back, most likely, and take a look at it and see how it sounds and practice that. And you will learn so much just from watching yourself and doing that. But rest assured, you have that ability. You kind of touched on the fact that you didn't feel like I believe you said that you didn't feel like you could do humor very well, but I bet you can. It might be a very deadpan humor. We have a member in our club here in Oklahoma City who didn't feel like he could do humor at all. And what he's done is he's practiced it and practiced it and practiced it. And he says some of the funniest things. And last night he gave a speech about going to McDonald's restaurant. And it was just the funniest thing that we had ever heard, and gave us a lot of statistics about that. Yeah, and he's deadpan. He never cracks a smile during the entire speech. So I think everybody has the ability to do all those things. You just need to say to yourself, one, that I do have the ability to do this, and I'm going to find it out, and I'm going to practice it. And that's the thing about Toastmasters. Anything we do in Toastmasters takes time. And that's why there's no end to it. You don't graduate from Toastmasters. I'm still trying to learn how to do table topics. I'm still trying to have to learn how to think off the top of my head. And so we're all trying to learn. And I've been in Toastmasters now for 37 years, longer than most of you are in age. So it takes a while to learn. Good question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just for a minute, so Mr. Harold, if you want to take a minute to hydrate or drink water, because we're having several more questions. Okay. And Mr. Aus and Mr. Hussein, if you wish to take a group photo before we resume questions, just go ahead.
Exactly. I would like to ask from every single person here in this meeting to open up their cameras, because we're about to take a group photo. So, Aus, are you going to do it, or I'm going to do it?
No, it's all right. Hey, everybody. I think we are not doing a group photo. We will do a group video because it's live.
Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, in a couple seconds, just do whatever gesture, the arcade, the victory.
I'll count down. I'll do the countdown, all right?
Okay.
Okay.
So which means that's going to be like some sort of a motion thing or something?
You can do everything. Anything you want to do.
Just give the green light, yeah.
It's already recording, so it doesn't matter.
Yalla. It's 3 and 2 and 1. Yeah.
Like this is the good thing to happen.
Okay.
Hold. I want everybody hold. Where's the print screen? Yeah, it's all right. It's all right. You're all good. Okay. You're all good.
Okay. That did it.
Great.
Yeah. All right.
Great.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. House. Sorry for the inconvenience. I will resume questions here. We have Mr. Ahmed Mumtaz from Baghdad Toastmasters. Mr. Ahmed Mumtaz, if you want to ask away.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Hello, Mr. Harold. It's nice having you, of course. Nice meeting you, despite it's being virtually. Well, I'll make my question specific and shorten into the point. I would like to ask, are there certain characteristics for people who are interested in public speaking, or can anybody play this role? Thanks a lot. Thank you for your time.
Okay, your question again, just to repeat that, was there certain characteristics?
Is it okay for everybody to play? Is it okay for everybody to play the role of public speaking, or does it require special characteristics for people whom they are interested in public speaking?
Yeah, no, I think everybody can participate in public speaking. I think the most important thing, it's like any profession that you go into, and I've heard this said by counselors everywhere, is when they talk about scientists and they're talking to their parents, and their parents say, well, I don't think my child is smart enough to be a scientist. And the counselor will say, it doesn't have to be smart, just has to have a high degree of interest in science. So I think the important thing about being a public speaker too is just like that. You just have to have a high degree of interest in being a public speaker. And I've also heard that if you wanted to be a professional speaker, and I have a lot of respect for professional speakers. I'm not a professional speaker, but I have a lot of respect for them because they work very, very hard. If that's what you want to do, then the strongest aspect of professional speaking is the ability to market yourself. You have to have a topic, you have to have a presentation, and you have to have good, sound, solid marketing. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Just having that interest in what you're doing is going to be the most powerful element of being a public speaker.
Okay, sir. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. We have also asked questions from the chat and also hand raised from Rahiq Samarai. Okay, Rahiq, if you want to go ahead.
Hello, Mr. Patterson.
Hello.
I'm happy to be here and be with all of you guys. Mr. Patterson, I have one question. You said that there are so many elements for the very good speech, and one of them, the most important, is having interest actually in speech. But my question is, do you think the accent in any language is really matter for being a very good speech? Because sometimes I feel like it's not really important, and sometimes I feel like if someone have a very good accent in any language, he will be having a great speech. So what do you think? Is really matter or not?
Now, I think you pose a very interesting question, because I've listened to a number of people with accents, and we all like to say that a certain person doesn't have an accent, but when we say that, it's because they sound just like us. And so we don't think they have an accent when they sound just like us. But listening to accents on speakers, I personally love it. I love it when I hear someone giving an accent. I think what's most important is that it be understood. You know, being in the United States, I speak only one language. I speak English. And so I think the clarity from the accent, I think it's the most important thing is that it be understood. And then the accent itself, I think, can be a very powerful element. And I've heard a number of speakers. We have a number of foreign nationals in the state of Oklahoma, and a number of them are member of Toastmasters, and they do very well. And I love listening to them speak. So I really don't think there is an advantage or a disadvantage either way. I do think at times there can be an advantage if you look at it in a speech contest format. Sometimes if you have, in Oklahoma, for example, if you have 6 or 7 people that speak like Oklahomans, and then you have an 8th person speaking who has an accent, then that's different. That is a plus. That works for that person in that presentation. As long as everything is understood, then I think that works very well. I think you have a very good question there, and I hope I've given you some semblance of an answer.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Surely we won't take a lot of Mr. Harold's energy. I assume that we give 10 more minutes for the questions. We have a member called Laura Lee. She says that her internet connection is a little bit bad, so she cannot go live and ask a question. She has written it on the chat. I will recite the question for you, Mr. Harold. What do you think of recent world champion speeches, which have been trending towards performance or showmanship, with Ramona J. Smith and Dhananjaya Hettitrachi as 2 examples?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is a change in the presentation format, and I think everybody's going to be comfortable with the era that they grew up in. As long as I've contended all along that if someone is doing something within the rules of Toastmasters, then more power to them. That everything, as long as everything is acceptable in that format, then that's fine. I guess, if I look at it from my personal standpoint, I want it to be more of a speech. I guess I chuckle sometimes after the speeches because I know what's going to happen to them, that because they've won the World Championship of Public Speaking, they're going to be asked to go other places and give that speech. And sometimes some of the speeches, I just wonder how they're going to handle some of the things that they did in that speech when they go other places to speak, because some of that could be a challenge to be able to do that. But it's all within the rules with Toastmasters. And so if they can do something to gain the attention, and I think that plays into that element of the judging forums where it talks about audience response, that they do something that gets an audience response, then their grade goes up in that.
Okay. Thank you for that. Anybody else has a question from the audience for Mr. Harold? If not, okay.
Yes. Hi, I have a question.
Make sure for Rebecca.
Okay, Mr. Rebecca, yeah. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Rebecca from Singapore Lanky Advanced Toastmasters Club. Mr. Harold, I have a questions about emotion. How to efficiently express underlying emotion through our speech? Because sometimes when we do speech, right, we cannot express the emotion. So I want to know how we can effectively do it in our speech. Thank you.
Yes, very good question. Yes, that's a difficult thing to do and difficult for a lot of people to do. And I have a problem with it myself too. But I think the most important element of that is eye contact. If you can make eye contact with somebody, it's like, I'm going to go right to the camera right now, and I'm going to start making eye contact with you here. And I'm going to open my eyes wider, and I'm going to make some gestures, and I'm going to talk right to you. And I'm only going to talk for a second, and then I'm going to look away. You don't want to invade somebody's space too long, but make that eye contact with them. It's a little bit harder on the Zoom concept. Right now, I'm looking at all the pictures on my screen when I should be looking up here at the camera and talking to you, and begin to have that emotion and that connection directly with you. And that's when the most emotional parts are going to come out. And then study the emotion a little bit. Learn how to emote with your face. And I have a problem with this, and I'm incredibly impressed with people who seem to do this very well. And so I think those are the things that you can try to do. If you're being in a club format, then learn to make that eye contact with people. Don't be afraid to make the eye contact. Don't hold it too long, but make it so that you're talking to somebody, you look at them, and then you move over to somebody else and look at them. And then you look at the whole room. And you've got that, along with the constant gestures with your hands, you've got the movement with your face as well.
Okay. Can I have second questions? This is also related with the emotion. The second one, in Toastmaster, we have this humorous speech, right? And normally when we talk with friends, they will laugh, they will jokes. But when we try to perform in Toastmaster or in front of the stage, it's not as funny as we make jokes with friends. So how we can transfer those, like I said, natural, funny things with friends to be performing in the stage?
I think those are things that are just going to have to be practiced, and you're going to have to stand up before a group and practice them. You know, that we have speakers that will stand up and practice various material, and at times they'll say something that in their head, like what you're talking about, in their head or with one or two friends, that was uproariously funny. But then they say it in the club meeting or in a presentation format for a group, and nobody laughs. And so they strike that one from their list. And sometimes they'll say something in a meeting that they had no intention of getting laughter at all, and they'll get a big laugh. And so those are the ones that you certainly want to make note of and remember that, so that you can say that elsewhere. And it's practice, I guess, that makes perfect. And that's what Toastmasters is. It is a laboratory. Toastmasters is a safe place for you to go and practice your speaking habits, so that you can practice those things and test them out. And after a while, you'll begin to find a pattern that works for you, and that pattern of humor, and you'll be able to add to that and go on to other stories that might work equally as well as one that works. So I think you've got good humor, and I think you'll find it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Mr. Rebecca, Toastmaster Rebecca. Next, we will have Toastmaster Miss Ilaf Ali. Miss Ilaf, can unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yes. Hello, Mr. Patterson.
Hello.
I have a question. It's from my personal experience, especially when I have a presentation in front of my colleague. It's not that much audience, but I feel sometimes they don't want to hear the prepared topics, or they are not interested in that much. So I feel a little bit confused, especially my facial experience. So totally I forget what apart to say. So there's any advice how I will handle the situation next time?
Okay, yeah, you're talking about, and this is in a professional setting where you're talking to a group of people and you don't feel like they have a great deal of interest in what you're saying. Is that kind of the question?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, that's always hard because I know in professional settings, people have to go to a meeting or have to go to this event to listen to these kinds of things. Then, you know, if there's some sort of joke that you can pull out of your hat, and we have wonderful resource called Google now, where you can Google up something and say, what do I say to start off a meeting that's funny, and see if you can find something there. And anything that you can indicate, I think also along with that, aside from the funny part, is let them know how long this meeting's going to be, and tell them at the beginning. It's kind of like the idea that doctors have taken recently, and nurses, when they're going to give you a shot or something and say, okay, you're going to feel a little stick and then it's all going to be over. Well, it's the same kind of thing with making this presentation. Say, okay, this is only going to last 15 minutes, and I'm going to tell you about this, 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 and this. And then we'll be out of here, okay? And then I would suggest that instead of finishing in 15 minutes, you finish in 12 minutes. Because nobody's going to complain about getting out early. And I know these are not necessarily presentation skills, but I've gone to so many civic clubs to speak, and they say, oh, we want you to speak about 20 minutes. Well, I promise you, if you finish in 15, you're going to be considered a good speaker, no matter what you talked about. So try to shorten that presentation as much as possible. I think these are tough areas because people have to be there. And so I think if you can lighten the load a little bit, and that means if you can do it with humor, great. If you can shorten it and make it shorter than what it was intended to be, then that's going to be appreciated too. And it kind of goes back to that old adage where they say, if you want to be seen, stand up. If you want to be heard, speak up. If you want to be appreciated, shut up. So.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. Thank you a lot.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, so we have time for a couple more questions. We have one from Toastmasters Sindoja. Go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Patterson. Hi again. So I have a question not really related to the speeches, but it is about your preparation. So you must very clearly remember the day of World Champion of Public Speaking, right? The day when you went on stage. When you have like a couple of hours before the competition, and I'm not sure how it works in the World Championship, whether you are informed of your slot before or not. Are you informed of your slot before?
Yeah, we had for the international speech contest, we had a meeting the day before. I think like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the day before. That contest took place on a Saturday morning. They were doing them in the morning at that time. And we had a meeting at 4 o'clock the day before. All of the speakers met in a room with the Toastmaster, the chief judge, and we drew for position. They basically had a bowl that they walked around the room, and we reached in and pulled out a number, and that was our speaking position. And so that was...
Sorry. So what was your preparation right before you went on stage? Like, the couple of hours before you went on stage, how did you tune yourself to go on stage? I mean, there is a whole lot of preparation involved before the days of your speech contest, but a couple of hours before the contest, your mindset needs to be completely there. How was your preparation during that time?
Well, that's a great question, and I can almost tell you by the minute everything that I did from what I got up at 6 o'clock in the morning. The speech contestants had to be down there by 7:30 that morning, and I got up at 6, went through my speech one time, went down there at 7:30 in the morning, And what they had to do, they showed everybody the stage, the platform from which we would be speaking. And we all had the chance to walk out there. We talked to the person who was going to put a mic on us so that we knew exactly where the mic was. They tested each one of our voice levels and told us the parameters of the stage from where we could walk. And then this particular contest was the last of the breakfast contests that they had. In other words, now they have auditorium style. This one, they had tables where everybody sat at breakfast. And all of the speakers sat reasonably close to the front so that they had easy access to the stage. And each one of us were to walk up the subsequent speaker. I was the 9th speaker. I was the last speaker out of 9 speakers. And so everybody had to walk up, get mic'd, get some final instructions from the person who was putting the mic on you, and then you would go out on the stage and give your speech. And so each one of us, during that 1 minute of silence, we would get up and go over, the mic would be put on us, and then we would walk out on the stage. And I felt this was the one contest, now that you bring this up, I felt more content with this contest. Not like I felt like I was going to win or anything like that, but I knew I was prepared. I knew they could drop a bomb in that room and I was not going to stop speaking. Nothing was going to make me stop. And I knew it backwards and forwards. I practiced my speech. One of the other things that I mentioned about practicing my speech, or the confidence element of my speech, I practiced it by saying it as fast as I could say it. I took this 7-minute speech and I said it in about 4 minutes. I mean, I just ran through the words as fast as I could. And one of the reasons I did that was because there were 1 or 2 spots that were a little bit bumpy, that I would get to it and I would pause. I would have to think about what came next. And I didn't want to do that, and it was making me mad. And so I decided, okay, in order to clear that up, I'm going to say this thing as fast as I can. And so I have to know those words. And what it did was it cleared up those bumpy spots, and it cut 6 or 7 seconds off of the length of my speech as well. And so that's another thing that I would offer to you in doing that. But yeah, I sat down with my wife and I sat at this big table. There were, I believe, 180 tables with 10 seats each in this grand ballroom in Chicago. And I think they didn't quite fill all of them up. I think the attendance for that one was 1,650 people in the audience. And we had breakfast. We had breakfast before the contest. Most of us as speakers didn't eat much breakfast before we spoke. And I felt I was very comfortable and felt very relaxed waiting through that. So long answer. I hope that helps.
Well, thank
Yes,
you for that.
thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's about time that we conclude our workshop and meeting for today. I would love, Mr. Patterson, I have one last question that is not about speeches or speakers. It's more likely diverted to evaluation or evaluators. Now, the shortcut version is, what were the main, like the essential values that the judges were evaluating the prepared speakers upon? 3 main points. I wish to know these because I wish to focus them also as an evaluator of a speech, not on a professional level, of course, but during the regular meetings, because evaluation, as essential as it is, sometimes it does not go, it is not does go to the same level as good as we are doing the prepared speeches. So I just let's ask question: what were the main points that the judges were focusing on? Something we can use as evaluators.
Okay, yeah, I think I think I hear two questions within your question there.
Okay.
First, I'll address the evaluation part in the evaluation of Toastmasters. And I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, Toastmasters is a laboratory trying to learn how to get better. And I think the method of evaluation should be based in encouragement. We want to encourage people to get better. And there's many studies, psychological studies, about how encouragement works better than just drilling down on somebody and saying that you did this wrong, you did this wrong, you did this wrong. You don't want to say that. You want to encourage them about all the things that they did right. Some of the best evaluations I've heard are when somebody stands up and says, you know, the speech you gave was really good. Let me pinpoint all the things that you did good. And so they go down this list of all the things that they did good. And that's more important from an educational standpoint, to learn what somebody did good than to learn what somebody did bad. And then you can tell them, and part of it's in the phraseology, that you don't say, boy, you really messed this up, so, you know, you got to change this. You say, okay, next time, try this. Next time, you might want to do this. And that way you're encouraging them, because you know there's going to be a next time, and that you're looking forward to hearing them that next time. So you can, I'm not saying that you whitewash somebody's speech, because all of us can improve a little bit. It's like I was evaluating a week ago, I was evaluating a woman in our club, and what I told her was, I said that, you know, I really loved your speech. Your speech was so good that I felt like your demonstration in talking about mentors was so important, and something that we can all learn from. And I think you seem to know it so well. I could tell that you spent a lot of time preparing on it, that next time what I would like to see you do is pick up the pace a little bit. I mean, your articulation is wonderful, and I think you can afford to pick up the pace a little bit. And when you do that, that's going to provide a little bit more energy. And she was pleased about that. It was a tip that I gave her to do, but it was also encouragement about the presentation that she gave. Now, moving to your question about the judges, or what the judges look for, I would suggest that you go to the judges form. You can print that off of the Toastmasters International website and print the judging forms of what they're looking for. But it's broken into 3 parts, and I can't tell you exactly what those parts are now. But what's important is that you're dressed appropriately. You want to be dressed in a business style, or what's acceptable in your culture in the room. And one of the ways they say that is dress one step ahead of your audience. If from a man standpoint, if all of your audience is out there wearing a suit and tie, then you should wear a tuxedo, or at least a suit and tie. And so be dressed according to your audience, be dressed to presentation style, because you're going to be graded on that. You're going to be judged on that. So if you're speaking and you have 6 speakers up there, and 5 of them are dressed like me with an open collared shirt, but this 6th man is wearing a suit and tie, points are going to go up from the judges, because that's part of the judging element. Audience response becomes a part. So if you provide some humor and you get a laugh, then you got audience response more so than others. And originality, talking about the originality of your speech, is part of that as well. And can't remember all the rest, but again, go to Toastmasters International and pull down that judges form, and it will give you the insights on that.
Well, thanks a lot for your input,
Mr.
Mr. Harold. Yes, Mr. Hussein?
There is something that I would like to stumble upon what Mr. Harold said, like it's a final thing. Okay. As you mentioned, Mr. Patterson, that you've been through Toastmasters for like almost 37 years. Is that correct?
Yes.
So, which means that it's basically more than like our ages right now. And for me, as a person who is speaking, I'm still like a junior for yourself. as I'm about to conclude my 3rd year in Toastmasters. So as for like a recommendation, and I know that you're going to give that kind of recommendation in a very hot plate, but for us to recommend the people, for us to talk with people, for us to make them realize how do we commit to the Toastmasters environment, how do we commit to this kind of a thing that matters the most for us, what kind of a thing that would you recommend for someone to commit and to join the Toastmasters environment, whether all over the place of the world and different countries and different people all over? What kind of a thing that would you say for those people to join first and then to commit as well?
Well, I think the most important thing about Toastmasters now, and what I've seen and what I love, is that it's growing faster around the world now than it is in the United States. And I think that's because, and what I heard your expression at the beginning of your meeting tonight, I believe it was Salam that said that, is that you want to be able to practice the English language. And it's a great format for that, to be able to practice the English language. I think what the world needs now more than anything is good communication. Good communication solves many problems, and that is the basis, fundamental element of Toastmasters, as long as leadership. And so if we can provide good worldwide leadership with good communication, with good civil discourse, then it becomes a better place for all of us. And I think being able to practice that, along with, I know I joined Toastmasters originally because I wanted to be able to think more quickly on my feet. I worked in a sales venue, and I didn't feel like I could answer the questions as fast as I wanted to. And by joining Toastmasters and the table topics format that it provides, I knew that after I'd participated in table topics a number of times, I had confidence that, hey, now I can do this. I can speak up in sales meetings. I can speak up to my clients when they ask questions. I can provide an answer. I may not have it off the top of my head, but I also learned through Toastmasters, that's okay. The answer is going to be there. So it's a big part of gaining the confidence. So I hope maybe you can pull something out of all of that I said, but I think there's a great meaning and a great place for Toastmasters all over the world.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Mr. Harold. That was a lovely introduction for all the guests that are not acquainted with the Toastmasters experience, to get to know what the club does and what are we doing, what are we learning here through the Toastmasters Club, Toastmasters experience. So, ladies and gentlemen, special thanks to you, and special thanks to Mr. Harold for his dedication, for his efforts to be here with us. Let's have a clap for Mr. Harold here. Okay, thank you for. By the way, it's almost, I think, 9:30 a.m. Am I right in your city? So you have to be a morning guy, you know, to wake up and prepare himself, you know. But he was also a Weight Watchers leader at some point of his life. So I assume that group of people, that organization, all of them are early morning people, and all of them are healthy stylists. So I assume so. So special thanks to you. Thanks for your efforts. Thanks for our guests, our international guests, our members for joining here through our special meeting, Baghdad Toastmasters. I hope we all learned something new. I myself learned a lot of new things today through Mr. Harold's presentation, through your questions, the input we had today. So I hope that we meet again on the upcoming meetings, and bless you all.